My next tutorial comes via a request from a follower on Instagram, and this is for Laura Maria, who is also known as Lomar 2022 on Instagram. So thank you very much, Laura, for the request to make this tutorial. And of course, I can't do something halfway, and instead of just making one of the Narutto characters, I've ended up making about 24. So stay tuned, subscribe if you want to follow along with these tutorials, and you'll get notified when they're posted. But we're going to start with, and please pardon me if I mispronounce the name, which I'm sure I'll do throughout this collection. This is UZUMAKI NARUTO. UZUMAKI Naruto, I guess. Anyway, so this is the guy that we're going to do today. And for this, we are going to need our standard rainbow loom in the offset configuration. The bands that we're going to be using are yellow, skin tone, orange, brown, black, white, and silver. You will also need beads for the eyes and possibly a C-clip. So let's get started. We're going to start with the attachments, and we'll start with his arms. And for that, we'll be using brown and skin tone bands. And everything will be double banded. So we're going to start with 2 brown bands. We're going to go down the right side of our loom 4 times with 2 brown bands each time. 3, 4, and we're going to follow that with 2 skin tone bands capped with a single skin tone band wrapped 3 times around the peg. We're going to do the same thing for the other arm. 2 brown bands going 4 times down the left side of our loom. 2, 3, 4, followed by 2 skin tone bands continuing down the left side of our loom, and we will cap this with a single skin tone band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And now we can loop these. We're going to reach inside our cap band, grabbing the bottom 2 skin tone and looping forward in a raindrop shape. And we're going to continue looping to the top of the pin, finishing off one of the arms. We're going to do the same thing for the other side, reaching inside our cap band, grabbing the bottom 2 skin tone, and looping forward. Again, we're making sure that we're grabbing both bands and that we form a raindrop shape as we loop ahead to the peg above. And that will give us our arms, and we can remove these from the loom, and we'll set these aside. Next, we want to make his feet, and again we'll be using brown and skin tone bands. We want to take 2 brown bands and go down our loom 2 times with 2 brown bands each time. Next, we want to cap this with a single skin tone band wrapped 3 times around the peg. We're going to do the same thing for the other side. 2 brown bands, 2 times, going down the left side of our loom, and again we will cap this with a single skin tone band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And we can loop these, reaching inside and looping forward in a raindrop shape. And we'll do the same thing for the other foot, again forming a raindrop shape as we go. And these we can set aside, our holding hook. Next, we want to make his goggles, and for that we're going to be using black and silver bands, and we want to take a single black band and double it, and we're going to place it on the first to the second peg on the right, and we want 2 silver bands. We're going to take the first one and double it, and the second one and double it, and place it on our loom as well. And we will cap this with a single black band, wrapped 2 times around the peg. And we can loop these, looping just our 2 silver bands, again reaching in and looping forward in a raindrop shape. And that will give us our goggles, which we can now remove from the loom. And we will set these aside as well. And that's it for the attachments that we need to make on the loom, I believe. We're going to move on to the ears and the nose. And for that, we're going to use skin tone bands. And as you know, I am a bit of a pack rat, and I save everything, including bands that have been pre-stretched for one project or another. And I'm just grabbing my 2 skin tone bands out of there for this next part. What we need to do is take a single skin tone band, wrap it around our hook 3 times, and we're going to take another skin tone band and double it, and we're going to slide all 3 loops onto our double looped skin tone band. And we'll reclaim the end, and this will give us 1 ear. And again, we want to take a single skin tone band, wrap it around our hook 3 times, and thread it onto a double loop skin tone band. So again, all 3 loops from our hook onto the band, and reclaim the end. And this will give us our 2 ears, and we can place these on our holding hook. And we'll set this aside. And for the nose, again, we want a skin tone band. We're going to double it and wrap it 3 times around our hook. And we will take another skin tone band and double it and slide all of these loops from our hook down onto our band, making sure that we loop all of the bands over. And again, we'll reclaim our end. If you've seen any of my previous videos, for some quirky reason I like to leave my nose on the hook so that I don't forget to attach it. And I know that kind of doesn't make sense because I have all the other attachments here, but for whatever reason, this is my little idiosyncrasy. I like to leave my nose on there. And the next attachment we're going to make are the eyes. And for that, I have pre-strung 2 blue beads onto what I use, which is the grass that you would line an Easter basket with. And I promise you, this is the best stuff you will ever use for threading beads onto your bands. It doesn't fray, it doesn't break, it lasts forever. So anyway, we need to get 2 white bands, and we're going to take a single white band and double it. We're going to tuck the end of our grass through, and then we want to slide one of the beads down our floss, making sure we catch the end so that we can slide it onto our double looped white band. And I'm going to place this on my hook and set it aside. We're going to do the same thing again, a single white band and double it, tuck the end of our floss through, and again we're going to slide our bead down our floss, or grass, or whatever it is you're using. I use those 2 terms interchangeably. And we want to slide the bead down onto our double looped white band. And again, we'll place this on our hook. And that will give us both of our eyes. So what we want to do now is take a single skin tone band, and we're going to slide both eyes from our hook onto the skin tone band. And we can set this aside on our holding hook. And I believe now we are ready to band our loom. I think that's the end of the attachments. So we are going to start at the top with his hair. And what we're going to do, everything will be double banded. And we're going to need yellow, skin tone, oops, I had some, and brown to start with, and orange. We're going to start with 2 yellow bands from the first to the second peg going down the center, 2 yellow bands from the first peg on the left to the first peg in the center, and 2 yellow bands from the first peg in the center to the first peg on the right. We are going to go down the left side 2 times with 2 yellow bands each time. And we're going to do the same thing on the right. 2 yellow bands 2 times going down the right side of our loom. We're going to move on to our skin tone bands. And we're going to go down the center 3 times with 2 skin tone bands each time. 2, 3. And for the neck, we want to use 3 skin tone bands, continuing down the center. We're going to move back over to the left side, and we'll put 2 skin tone bands, continuing down the left side, and 2 skin tone bands from the 4th peg on the left to the 5th peg in the center. We're going to do the same thing on the right, continuing down the right side with 2 skin tone bands, and closing off the face with 2 skin tone bands from the 5th peg in the center to the 4th peg on the right. Moving down to the shoulders, we're going to continue down the center with 2 brown bands. And for the shoulders, we're going to go over to the left with 2 brown bands from the 6th peg in the center to the 6th peg on the left, and 2 brown bands from the 6th peg in the center to the 6th peg on the right. We want to continue down the center with 2 brown bands 3 times, going down the center pin. We're going to move over to the left side, and we're going to take 2 brown bands. We next want to switch to orange and place 2 orange bands, followed by 2 more orange bands, 2 brown bands, and 2 orange bands 2 times, continuing down the left side, and we want to finish off the left side pin with 2 skin tone bands. We want to do the same thing on the right side. So starting at the 6th peg from the top, we're going to go down with 2 brown bands, followed by 2 orange bands, 2 more orange bands, 2 brown bands, 2 orange bands, 2 times, continuing down the right side. And again, we'll finish off the right side pin with 2 skin tone bands. To close off the center, we're going to use orange bands, and we want to continue down the center with 2 orange bands, and we will go from the 3rd peg in the center to the fourth peg on the left with 2 orange bands, and again from the third peg in the center from the bottom to the fourth peg on the right with 2 orange bands. We're going to cap this center peg with a single orange band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And now we're ready for our attachments, and we're going to take the eyes, and I'm going to take one end and place it around the third peg from the top on the left. I'm going to separate the eyes and stretch one band around the third peg from the top in the center, and place the other end around the third peg from the top on the right. I also want to grab the band that's holding the eyes and stretch it down over the fourth peg from the top. And that will give us just a little more security and tightness on our eyes. And next we have the ears. And the ears are going to go on the second peg from the top on the left, and another on the second peg from the top on the right. And I just need to check the positioning of his goggles. I believe they are across his forehead and not around his neck. Yes. To attach the goggles, what we want to do, I want to take one end that's on my hook and place it around the second peg from the top on the left. And the other side, what we want to do, we want to grab the 2 loose ends, and we're going to place them around the second peg from the top on the right. Leaving your finger in, you want to cross it over and stretch it back around the second peg from the top on the right. And that's just basically doubling it over that peg. And there we go. And next we have the arms, the feet. And one is going to go on the last peg down on the left, and the next, the last peg down on the right. And the arms are going to go on the 6th peg from the top on the left, and the other one on the 6th peg from the top on the right. And now we're ready for our holding bands, and I want to take a single yellow band and place it around the first peg on the left and the right, and the second peg in the center. We're not going to place one on the second peg or the third peg, but we do want to take a skin tone band and go around the fourth pegs on the left, the right, and in the center. Moving down to his body section, we're going to take a single brown band and place it around the 7th pegs from the left, the right, and in the center. A single orange band around the 8th pegs on the left, the right, and in the center. Back to brown around the 9th pegs, and back to a single orange band around the 10th pegs. And now we are ready to loop. We're going to start in the center, and we're going to reach inside our cap band, and we're going to grab the top 2 orange bands and loop over to the right, reaching in, grabbing the next 2 orange bands and looping over to the left. Before we begin looping up the left side, we want to take a single white band and wrap it 3 times around our hook. And we're going to reach in and loop just our skin tone bands, making sure we form a raindrop shape to the peg above. And when we grab our first set of orange bands, we want to slide all 3 loops down onto the orange bands before we loop ahead to the peg above. And we're going to continue looping, and we're going to go all the way up to the neck area, which is the 6th peg from the top in the center, and we want to make sure that we're staying inside our holding bands and that we're grabbing both bands and forming our raindrop shapes as we go. Okay. And over to the center. We're going to do the same thing on the right side, minus the white bands. So we're going to reach inside our attachment, grab the bottom 2 skin tone, and loop forward in a raindrop shape. And again, we're going to do this all the way up to the center peg at the neck, making sure we stay inside all of our bands and our holding bands. And we're going to grab just the bottom 2 and loop forward in a raindrop shape. And again, the bottom 2. And now we can loop up the center, and we're going to start here at the 3rd peg from the bottom, reaching inside, grabbing the bottom 2 orange, and looping forward. I'm going to continue all the way up. And when we get to the neck area, we want to remember that we have used 3 bands, and we're going to reach in and carefully grab all 3 and loop forward. Next, we want to reach in and grab the top 2 skin tone bands and loop over to the right. Reaching in again, grabbing the next 2 skin tone and looping over to the left. And we're going to continue up the left side, reaching inside our holding band and grabbing the bottom 2 skin tone and looping forward. Again, we're staying inside the bands that are holding our eyes and looping forward. The same with the next set. We're staying inside our ear and our goggle bands and looping the bottom 2 yellow bands forward. Going to do the same thing on the right side, staying inside all of our bands and looping forward. Again, at the ear, we want to make sure we're staying inside our goggle bands and our holding band and just grabbing the bottom 2 yellow and looping to the center. Now we can loop up the center, and we're going to loop our first skin tone bands, and from the 4th peg to the 3rd peg is where I always attach my nose. So I'm going to reach inside the bands holding my eyes, grab the 2 skin tone bands, and slide my nose down onto the 2 skin tone bands before I loop them to the peg above. And we're going to continue looping, grabbing the bottom 2 skin tone. And what we want to do, we want to go underneath our goggles, and this may be a bit tricky, so maybe before we loop this, and I'll just put it back for now, what we could do is take our goggles and stretch them down over the 3rd peg from the top, and then when we reach in, I'm going to put these back where they were, and then when we reach in to grab our bottom 2, the goggles won't be in the way, and we will finish looping to the top, and then we can replace our goggles across the center and give those bands a little stretch. And now we're ready to remove it from the loom once we check and make sure that we have looped all of the bands. And it's always important to double check. I have mentioned in several of my previous videos that the 2 biggest mistakes that I make is forgetting to add the holding bands and forgetting to loop bands. So it's always important to double check. Measure twice, cut once, as they say. I'm going to take a single yellow band for a slip knot band. I am going to reach down through the middle of this top center peg, going through all of the bands. I'll grab a hold of the end of a single yellow band, pull it up through the center, and I'm going to form a slip knot. And before I tighten this too much, I'm going to take my hook and loosen some of the tension, and then I can gently tug on my slip knot band to tighten it up a little bit. And now we're ready to remove this from the loom. So we're going to gently remove the legs, and then I'll use my hook to pry up the rest of the bands. And it is always important when you're doing characters to start at the bottom and loop your way to the top, because it doesn't stretch them as much. And as I've said, sometimes you really would like a little bit of stretch in your bands, and I can think of bracelets, for example, that you may want them to be stretched a little tiny bit so that they'll fit, or just to help even out the bands a little bit. But for characters and figures and such, it really is important to start at the bottom to not stretch the bands as much. There are several places where there are several bands on the pegs, and stretching it could just be that little push too much that may cause the bands to break. So, and as you can see, we're going to need a little bit of tweaking done here. We want to make sure that his nose is pointing to the front. The same with his eyes. And I always start with the eyes, and I always end up readjusting them, so I don't know why I don't leave those to the last. I am going to tighten up my slip knot band again, and I'm just going to tweak his ears a little bit and spin. I'll use my hook, place it through all 3 loops of the cap band, and I'm just going to twirl that around my hook to even out the bands. And that will be his ears. This side looks okay. And for his visor, I want to just stretch it into the center. And we're going to go down and define his feet a little bit. And I'm just going to place my hook down through the top of the teardrop and in the center, and give them a little tug to the side. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, putting my hook through the center of the teardrop shape and tugging the bands to the side. And as I said, that just defines his feet a little better so they look more like actual feet. And for his arms, I want to go down through the center of the teardrops, and I'm just going to tug the bands to angle his arm down a bit. And the same thing on the other side. Again, going down through the center of the teardrop shapes and giving a little tug. And that will angle his arm down a bit. And you can add a mouth or not. It's totally up to you. What I'm going to do is just use a single skin tone band to represent lips. And I'm going to go from the back to the front in the general vicinity of where the mouth should be. And I'm going to grab a hold of one end of my skin tone band and pull it through to the back. And again, going from the back to the front. And I'll grab a hold of the other end of my single skin tone band and pull that through to the back. And I'm just going to secure these ends with a C-clip. And then I will adjust the mouth in the front. And again, it's totally up to you if you would like to add a mouth or not. A lot of times they're not visible. I sometimes use white bands to represent teeth, or pink bands if it's a girl to represent lipstick. And but there you have it. And the next thing we need to do is secure this slip knot band. And I'm just going to tuck it into the back by weaving my hook through a few bands at the back of his head, and I'll grab the end and pull it through. And the purpose is just to secure this out of the way. You can also attach it to your C-clip that's there if you like, if you would feel more comfortable. Perhaps if you're making this for a child to play with or something. We're not quite done, because next we need to spike his hair. And it is a good thing that I am such a pack rat, because I do keep all of my broken bands, which is exactly what I want. I really should organize these by color like I did with my stretched out bands. But I'm just going to grab a few yellow bands here that have been broken. And I know I've got lots. I've got lots of bands that have been broken. But we're going to grab a few yellow pieces here. And what we want to do, and this may be easier if you have a fine crochet hook. If I can get this to work. This may be too fine of a crochet hook. I'm just going to pull one end of the broken band through to the other side, like this. And then what I want to do is tie it. So I want to stretch it, not enough to break it again, but I'm just going to stretch it to tie it. Try to go to one end of the band, because now that I've tied it in a knot, what I want to do is take a pair of scissors, and I'm just going to trim it even with the other side, and that's going to give us one little spike. So we're going to take another broken band, pull it through, grab both ends, and tie this in a knot. Again, staying close to one end of the band, because if you have a full band, you should be able to get at least 2 spikes for the hair out of it. And again, I'm just going to take my scissors and snip this off. And I'll do one more with you. You kind of get the idea. But you're just going to do this all over his head until you have the look that you like for his spiked hair. And the more you use, the more spiky it's going to look. You could stop with 3 or 4 if that's the look that you like as well. Depends on if you've saved your broken bands like I do. You may not want to waste a whole bunch of bands on making spikes for his hair, because he certainly looks fine just with 2 or 3. Just to get the general idea that his hair is supposed to be spiky is fine. And we'll tie this in a knot. My hands keep slipping and the band pulls through, which is not good because then I have to start over. So, alright, I think I finally got it. So sliding it down to one end of my band, pulling this tight, and I'm adjusting the length by just tugging on one end a little bit, and then I'll tighten it. And again, I will take my scissors and level up this spike and clip. And as I said, you get the general idea. So you just want to go along and continue making little spikes for his hair. And if they seem not to be staying, you can tie a double knot in them if you feel that would help secure them better. But again, you get the general idea. I think you're just going to continue along like that, making spikes in his hair. And I think I'm just going to add one more. Or at least tuck this one so that it's going to spike better. And I'm not happy with the length of this spike, so what I'm going to do, it's a little too long, I'm just going to stretch the bands to place them properly, and I'll see where these spikes lie. And I'm going to grab a hold of the knot, and I'm just going to twist it so that the spikes are more to the back, and then I'll stretch it to put the bands back. And now I'm just going to trim these a little tiny bit, being careful not to snip any other bands, to the length that I want. And as I said, I'm just going to add one more. So I'm going to go through a couple of bands, grabbing the end of a broken band, if it will cooperate. pull one end through, and I'm just going to tie a knot. Making sure it's not too long for the spike, and I will trim the other end. And there you go. And now we can adjust his eyes again to make sure they're right. Put his arms back down. Yeah. And there you have it. This is, I have to say his name again, UZUMAKI Naruto, I believe, from the Naruto series. Again, I apologize for the pronunciation. Bear with me, I've got a lot of these to get through. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please like and comment below. I would love to see your version if you make one. And don't forget to subscribe. As I said, I've made 24 of these altogether, so I still have 23 to come. And I also have lots of other collections that I'm working on as well. So if you subscribe, you'll be notified when those are posted as well. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next time.